And so what happens is you start hitting the ball more consistent in the center of the face. And in fact, a lot of guys gain distance when they go to one length irons because they're hitting the center of the club face more. The concept of single length irons is not new. It dates back, believe it or not, when the game was originally started back in Scotland and everything. The guys had clubs where the shafts were all the same length, and it was just the head of the club that was different. And that, over the years, even into the early 1900s, Bobby Jones played single length irons. A lot of people don't understand that and realize that one of history's greatest to ever play the game played single length irons, but it was really before the dawn of the media age. As we kind of got later into the 1900s, the middle of the century, golf club manufacturers wanted to accommodate people, and it really came down to people wanting to hit the ball further. And what they found is by adjusting the length of each iron, they can increase the distance on a club. So now it became the standard that every manufacturer had irons that were a half inch longer than the next. So, even today, if you look, and what's really funny is as time's gone on, those lengths have increased even more. So, a 4-iron, which used to be the longest in the bag in 1960 versus a 4-iron that's the longest in the bag today in a traditional set, there's probably a good inch and a half difference in length from those because manufacturers wanted to create distance. And we've seen the same thing with drivers. Drivers used to be, when I was really getting into the game in the early 90s, a driver was 42 and a half, 43 inches long as a standard. And now you're talking a driver as 45 and a half inches standard. And it's what I like to refer to as the distance race. Every golfer wants to hit it longer. Mm-hmm. So the idea of single length is, and what's nice is with today's technology, you're able to get the same results. And really, Bryson DeChambeau's brought it to the forefront. Between a combination of Bryson and Cobra manufacturing, they're the biggest manufacturer that makes single length irons. But essentially, with a single length iron, all your irons from 4 through your wedges are the exact same length. So you don't have a step up in length that helps you increase distance. All the distance is gained in the club head. And typically off the shelf, a set of single length irons comes in at a 7-iron length, which is what a club is, or the most comfortable club for most players is the 7-iron. So they make them 7-iron length. Now, don't get me wrong, Cobra's not the only company that does it. There's some that have been doing it since the early 90s, and I could give you a rundown of all the guys that do it. But over on my channel, when I talk about different manufacturers and stuff, you can find all that information over there. Because it can be an hour to talk about all the differences with all the manufacturers. But when you look at it, the idea of the single length is so that you can build one single swing for all your irons. So typically you've got 10 irons in the bag. So instead of having to change how far you stand away from the ball every time you hit an iron and change where the ball is between your feet every time you hit an iron, with the idea of the single or one length irons, you set up the same. It's the same distance away from the ball position's the same, and the swing's exactly the same. You let the club head actually do its job. And so what happens is you start hitting the ball more consistent in the center of the face, and that makes up for that distance that you're losing by having longer clubs. So the idea is not something that's designed to make you lose distance. And in fact, a lot of guys gain distance when they go to one length irons because they're hitting the center of the club face more, which is where you're going to get the most distance. So that concept, again, like I say, golf smarter, not harder. Why have 10 different swings for each one of your irons when you can have one for all your irons, become consistent? And, as time goes on, I think you're going to see more guys, more pros switch over to the single length or one length irons for simplicity. A lot of guys coming out of high school and going into college, that younger generation, we're starting to see kind of go to the single length or one length irons because they want to be like Bryson, because he bombs a ball 400 yards and his irons, it's just a simple swing, and you're going to see it. And eventually there's going to be a few more guys that make it to the tour. I'll never make it to the tour unless, some kind of miracle happens and God sends me a lightning bolt or something. But, I'm more than okay with that. I want to help guys understand that using this philosophy of one length or single length irons is going to improve your game and make it more fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I feel like a lot of guys, like you said, it's this distance game. And when you first brought up single length, I was like, oh, and I do research a lot. So I looked and I was like, the distance gapping and all these issues, and I was very concerned with it. But I'd noticed that my driving distance did increase over the lessons we've done, which is nice. But I think more important is, the iron game. We added, I think it was 60 yards to my 4-iron, and that's simply because I was actually hitting the ball well. And so, this distance, it doesn't, you don't have to do all this crazy stuff if you just improve your swing mechanics a little bit. So,
yeah, and that's exactly it. And it comes down to, if you think about it, Zach, your 4-iron, if you would have a regular, what we call traditional or variable set of irons, your 4-iron in that bag is probably somewhere between 2 and 3 inches longer than the 4-iron you're currently playing. So now if you think about it, you're further away and it's harder to find that center of the club face. And whereas with the 4-iron being the same length as the 7-iron, you're allowed to be closer, and it just allows you to connect better and get better ball flights. And you're a perfect example of what I'm talking about. And guys, again, Zach's going to link the videos, but if you want to see his progression from really starting on a driving range to to building up his game, you're one of the ones that I can really say, listen, I've changed their golf game. And there's a lot of guys I have done that with, but you're one of the beginners where I've taken, fresh to the game or really new to the game. And, just over 5 lessons, what we've seen is insane. And I don't think you'd be where you are if you were playing variable length irons.
No, absolutely not. And I think that was part of the reason I did want to switch, because, I only golf once a week would be generous. I think I played 7 rounds this season, and having to learn 14 swings is just not something I can do. As a shot putter, you have one throw. You can change the weights of the throw, but it was literally just one throw, and you're practicing hundreds and thousands of throws to get the technique down. And I know golf is very similar in the fact that it's very technique heavy, and so I don't have time to perfect 14 swings. I think I was listening to it was Tiger Woods' biography, and he switched his swing so many times, and he spent thousands of hours learning new swings. So it's like, I do not have time to spend thousands of hours to learn even just a few swings, let alone redo it after I've kind of gotten it down. And so I wanted to make sure that if I'm spending time out there and I'm practicing as much as possible. And with irons all the same length, if you're hitting a 4-iron, you're hitting a pitching wedge, like you're practicing at least the mechanics of the swing every single time. So if you don't have single length irons, you need to check Craig's channel out, and we'll have you've seen cards here and links below, so make sure you check that out. But single length irons absolutely are the way to go, in my opinion.
I hope you enjoyed today's video, and Craig made some amazing points on how having single length irons just makes it so that you only have to practice one swing. You're going to get better consistency in your swing and your contact, better distances, and honestly, you're just going to enjoy the game better.